An object in motion stays in motion, an object at rest stays at rest. If they're at rest before the cold email, they're going to stay at rest, even if they give you the details of that pain that they currently know. They're going to stay at rest unless you find something new. So you have to find something new that they didn't know about within your cold outreach whenever you're sending it to them.
Welcome to the Emblazers Show, where B2B leaders are igniting revenue. I'm your host, Abby Kerr. And on today's episode, my colleague Tim Riesterer sits down with CEO of Flip the Script, Becc Holland, to unpack why the old prospecting playbook is failing and what today's sellers must do instead. From creating demand to writing outreach that actually earns attention, this conversation is full of sharp, practical ways to build pipeline more effectively. But first, let's talk a little bit about Becc Holland. Becc is CEO of Flip the Script, a sales media company, and she calls herself a victim of the craft and a practitioner to the core. She is on the relentless drive to pivot the sales world into seeing things from their buyer's point of view. Becc describes herself as an opinionated girl from Texas who lives in Paris, loves data, Bill James, Oscar de la Renta, and Charles Dickens, and as someone who just wants to make the sales world a better place to be in. Let's go to the episode right now.
Becc, it's so great to have you here. So great to see you again. I know you're in France, but I feel like you're right here. I get asked these questions all the time. We work with a couple hundred clients every year. And one of the hot topics is prospecting, and not just prospecting, BDR, SDR, but full funnel. People have to do their own prospecting. And they're like, our top of the funnels are not filling. Our new logo pipeline creation is lagging. And I'm like, if we're going to do a podcast on that, I can't do it alone. I got to bring Becc Holland to the table.
To fill with the empty air. fill the air.
And you know what? I mean this just totally generously. You can fill a lot of air. So
I got a lot of air.
So let's talk about this for a second, because I don't think prospecting today, when people are saying, oh, they're lamenting the prospecting pain, the solutions aren't the same as they've always been. Stuff's moving so fast in this space. So you've been around it a little bit. So tell me what was formerly known as prospecting and what today is known as prospecting.
Yeah, well, I think it's a great topic, and BTW, thanks for having me. I'm glad to fill the air with you anytime. But as far as prospecting, how it's changed, we could talk about a lot of tactics and obviously the introduction of AI and and how the landscape's changed and how much tech has changed. I think the main thing that's changed the reality for so many people is the results have changed from what we used to be doing, what the results were, to what they are today for what we used to be doing. So what used to be done in the past was, I'm going to load up 1,000 contacts. I'm going to put them into a sequence, and I'm going to write it to the best of my ability of, a certain cadence or sequence of actions depending on my sales engagement provider. And I'm just going to hit blast with a certain cursory amount of customization of like first name and maybe the introduction of the company name or their role. And that was working. This is back in 2000 and I would say 15, 16 eras, really when sales engagement was coming on the spot. And so it was working, being defined as before people had really blanched out their TAM and before the introduction of email deliverability and people getting less and less emails. I mean, people were booking 35, 40 outbound appointments a month, depending on the maturity of the market that they were selling into. So we slowly saw that dissipate, not only within an organization as they had been prospecting over time, but over the market at all. The hooks that were used to work weren't working anymore. And so we've seen kind of this slow paddle out to where I would say the average, it's been dependent over time, but if you are still using that kind of approach, regardless of the quality of the writing, but sending over, 50 emails a day to different people within your quote unquote TAM without any personalization, without finding something that they don't know. People are booking, I would say, on the upper hand of 1 to 2 appointments on outbound, true outbound per month per rep, which the math just isn't there anymore. So that's kind of the old state of things and how they're panning out today if people are using old tactics.
So the math isn't the same. So how we're holding people accountable, the activities and the volumes we're measuring all have to change. So what does that look like today? Like as if I lead a team or I have expectations of my full funnel sellers to do meaningful prospecting, what should I be expecting? What should I be inspecting?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. I think the main thing that has to change, I'm not going to say that it has changed, but the thing that has to change for people to be successful is we are dependent upon in the older world of there's a portion of my market that's already in market of like pain has turned into a problem, meaning pain's just a negative experience. It could be scale 1 to 10 of 1, could be a 9, could be a 2, could be an 8, could be unbearable, etc. And a problem is something you're going to do something about. You're going to solve or solve for. So not all pains are problems. Something that's annoying doesn't mean that you're going to solve for it. It's dependent upon priority. So in the former world, we were just banking on the idea that we were going to run into this slim, and I mean razor sharp slim portion of the market that was about to do something about something, but just hadn't quite yet. And the numbers showed that then, but especially show that now. So, I mean, the average open rate is 15 to 25%, and the average reply rate overall is 0.5 to 0.7%, not like positive reply rate, like they're going to take a meeting, meaning unsubscribe is included in that, not 50%, 0.5%. And so our numbers just show it. So I think the thing that has to change is we have to, instead of attract pre-existing demand, we have to create new demand with our emails. And people say like, well, that can't be done. What are you going to create the urgency with discounts? Or are you going to create it with that? And I'm like, no, you don't create demand by issuing out a discount. Actually, statistically speaking, that will decrease the odds that you're going to close. You have to create new demand by creating a new problem, not by creating a problem that doesn't exist, but by finding a problem for the person that they didn't know about. So if they think the problem, the pain that they have is the size of the state of Texas, but actually the size of the problem is the size of the United States, they're only going to spend money and prioritize based on the size of the state of Texas because that's what they know. But what they don't know is all of these other states that exist that are going to turn into a goblin very quickly if they don't do something about. So cold calls, emails, marketing materials, et cetera, but especially cold outreach, if it's done well, and this is the 0.02% of the time that I'm going to say that cold outreach does actually do this, it should be asking a question to qualify someone that they have a problem that they previously speaking didn't know about. Then you create new demand on the spot. So you create more urgency and budget and like need or desire to solve for it, because based on what they knew beforehand, they weren't willing to do anything about it. But based on what they know now, after that cold email, they are willing to do something about it. So I'll kind of end this rant with this. An object in motion stays in motion. An object at rest stays at rest. If they're at rest before the cold email, they're going to stay at rest, even if they give you the details of that pain that they currently know. They're going to stay at rest unless you find something new. So cold outreach should not be cursored by, we work with people who struggle with blank, because if they struggle with blank and they can identify with that group, it means that whatever they're struggling, quote unquote, struggling with is not bad enough based on what they know. So you have to find something new that they didn't know about within your cold outreach whenever you're sending it to them.
Yeah, that's so rich, because so many companies want to do like voice of the customer or look at keywords and things like that and say, if we can just align to the problems they know they have and the problems they seem to be searching on, then we'll catch them. What I hear you saying is that it was razor thin and now it's even thinner, and we're never going to hit the kinds of targets and numbers we're looking for just waiting to catch that demand. We have to create demand, and creating demand is a bigger lift than most people think. Like the object that's not in motion is also subject to status quo bias and all those things that are just holding them back. And I always say it's a much bigger dig to get somebody off of status quo and in motion than people estimate. And yet they write such vanilla stuff. They offer such vanilla conclusions that there's just no way that's going to work. There's no way you're going to get an object off of rest.
100%. And even when you're talking about an object in motion stays in motion, unless an act upon by an outside force like procurement, an outside force like new buyer in the deal, like people slow down in essence because of fear. So the way you can counteract both is by finding things that they didn't know. It's not by making them more afraid of what they're already afraid of. It's by enabling them to understand things that they didn't know, so that they're less afraid that what they are, that the outcome uncertainty, that they're not going to reach their outcome. It's decreasing that bucket by finding things that they didn't know. So they're like beforehand, they know that they don't know enough. That's clear. That's why they research so much. I mean, Forrester talks about there's 20 different things that they will look up before they even start to make a purchase. And 72% of buyers won't engage with the seller before they start to do research. They know they don't know enough. But it's like, if I can help find some things new, even if they're still, it can propel them into motion. If they're in motion, it can keep them into motion, like almost in curling, you're countering out that friction by finding things that they didn't know. So they're like, based on what I knew beforehand, I wasn't confident, but based on what I know now after this seller, I'm more confident. Not that that gremlin won't become true, but that the odds of that gremlin becoming true are less because this person is in front of me and is an advocate with me in this buying journey.
So it's really rich to tell them something they don't know, which is, where do you find that? Because you can't go ask them, because by definition, they don't know it. So how do you find it? And then how do you present it in a way where you're not like saying, you suck, you suck. You're like, they're going, oh, wow, thank you. Can I have another one of those? Tell me, seems like a magic formula. How do you invent the gremlins and the goblins that are effective?
Yeah. So, I mean, the $1 million question is, people are like, well, how do I find, especially if I'm selling into like a CTO or a CISO or a buyer person, it's very technical, that I'm just an SDR, or I'm just an account executive. How do I find that? So it's actually it's much easier than people think. And the reason I'm saying this is because I task myself with, before I'm training someone, that I have to train on their terms, meaning I have to relate all examples to their buyer, and that's originally what put me on the path to solve it, of instead of giving sales examples or instead of giving dating examples or whatever it is, that I can give them real examples for their buyer. But, as you go from client to client to client, it's like all their buyer personas are going to change. So it's very simple, actually. The smartest thing that you can do, at least in my opinion, is just use whatever engine you want to and say that, give them 2 prompts. The first prompt is, give me the top 3 lagging indicator KPIs that blank is measured on. So if it's an IT director, or it's a CFO, or if it's a, let's say a CX director, then it's, give me the top 3. But you could say 1, but arguably 2, but give me the top 3 lagging indicators that the buyer person is measured on, the industry average of those indicators, and at what point they typically cause a problem. What's the average performance of them? So that the main North Star. So if you don't even know how I measured as a buyer persona, then I'm not going to want to talk to you. So you'll get a number, and it's different for every persona. Of like CFO, it's gross profit margin. IT director, it's server uptime. CX director, it's customer retention. HR, it's employee retention or open job recs. And so each one of these buyer personas, at least the North Star at that point. But where you really get meaty is where you say, and that's where the business problem is typically anchored, in my opinion. Where you really get gritty is the second prompt of, give me the top 20 to 40. You can pick whichever one you want to. Give me the top 20 leading and coincidental indicators that affect let's use the CFO, for instance, or let's use the IT director. Let's go really technical, that affect server uptime for an IT director. At what point those 20 KPIs, the industry average of those KPIs, and at what point those 20 KPIs cause a problem with increasing server downtime for an IT director in a chart format. And I say in a chart format, please, because I'm from Texas originally. And so it just spits out these 20 indicators of if you want to get to know a persona, just get to know their indicators. The only difference from persona to persona to persona is what they're measured on and what they're looking at. So it'll give you network storage availability, or backup success rate, for instance, or for server uptime. And it will give you the industry average and at what point it causes a problem, or the network speed, let's say network latency. So instead of, to your point, saying, do you have a problem with network latency that you don't know about? That's ridiculous. You're finding something they don't know about. So I really bust it into 2 categories of misdiagnosis is something they believe it's not true. A misdiagnosis is something you've missed entirely. So if they say, no, we're all good on network latency, and I'm like, my first step is, I'm like, well, what do you mean by all good? What is your network latency, if you don't mind me asking? And they're like 300 milliseconds. And I'm like, found one, because, is what I'm thinking in my head. So the second step is I deliver a stat. I'm like, interesting. And they're like, well, what do you mean by interesting? I'm like, well, industry average is less than 100 milliseconds, and statistically speaking, anything over 200 milliseconds, and it's going to cause a 20% increase in server downtime for an IT director. And then I just shut up for a second, and you can just see that spark go off. And the third step is I change the subject to a question on either what I do think the root cause is of like, what's your backup success rate, if you don't mind me asking, or to double down on the root cause that I've just blown up of like, how long has your network latency been at 300 milliseconds, if you don't mind me asking. So in that case scenario, you're not even reveling in the moment that you're like, I just found something you don't know. And like, to your credit of like, they're just trying to solve a problem. So the fact that you just found something they didn't know, the goal isn't to say, I'm awesome and I can be valuable. It's to hypothetically show them something towards solving that problem, regardless of whether you solve for it or not. So once you do those, like, honestly, it's like put in those prompts, get that chart, learn those metrics. If you learn 5, you're going to be good. You learn 10, you're going to be great. You learn 20, you're going to be deadly. Because just because they're an IT director does not know that they mean that they know the industry average. And at what point, it hypothetically causes a problem. So anytime you find one of those, you spark more, create more demand for them to hypothetically solve for it, and also counteract the idea in their head that they're going to get it wrong. Because when you recommend something, they think A, it's for a reason, and B, it's for the right reason, because you know a heck of a lot of stuff that you can add to the game of what they already do. So in my experience, that's how you can do it without being like, you don't
want to say the S word because you were not allowed to, or I think what's interesting is that like the idea that you don't even have to know what their performance is. Like I always understand persuasion, the most effective form of persuasion to be a self-persuasion. So all you did was sort of evoke self-persuasion. You're like, here's a North Star benchmark. Here's an industry average. And here's what happens if you're below the industry average. And then it's kind of, what say you? Almost like you don't even have to ask what their performance is. You present these, and now they're trying it on. They're taking ownership of it. And I always say now they can give you an answer where they're maybe better than that, but they're still broken. And because you've expanded their range of reason, they're now like, wow, okay, this is a big deal. I didn't know this was as big a deal. I didn't realize this thing was keeping me from achieving my end goal. And I didn't realize how important it was. And I didn't realize how off I was. But again, you didn't go in telling them they stink. You go in just giving them some data, sharing a few insights, and then asking a really good provocative question.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and most of what I am trying to harbor before I give any kind of stat is I'm trying to find out what is their specific data point, because I mean, you don't know if it's a problem for them. I mean, statistically speaking, you're like, maybe it likely is. But when I ask that stat, if they were to tell me, I'm like, what's your network latency? And they're like 95 milliseconds. I'm like, they're fine. And I move on because I'm like, that's not a problem. But I'm like, what's your backup success rate, for instance? And they're like, no, we're pretty good. And I'm like, what's pretty good? And they're like 72. I'm like, oop, found one. And it's not just about finding the ones that like people will talk a lot about if they're harboring the conversation a certain way to change it onto the one that you solve. And I'm like, that's not how buyers work, because that's not how buyers solve. Meaning it doesn't matter if you help them with something that you don't specifically solve for with your product. They see you as valuable or they don't. And that's based on how many unknowns did you find for them in the process of solving. So if you find 3, even if you don't sell to those, you almost get double credit because they know that your agenda is to help regardless of whether that means cash to you. So I'm like, that's the good news of like, you don't just have to memorize and narrow in on the ones that you point to. Like if you help me on these 3 points, and I'm wondering, what you think about this point on that you do sell towards, or you do, can hypothetically vend towards. So it's just a really meaty conversation. The worst case scenario, they walk away with more information than they had before they talk to you. So like kind of to bring it all full circle in terms of prospecting, I think the main thing that people are doing wrong is they're like, do you struggle with this problem that you already know that you have? And I'm like, well, put aside the fact that if they already knew they hadn't, it was bad enough, they would already start to do something about it. You have no credibility there. Everyone wants to sell to Southwest Airlines now. Everyone wants to, you know what I'm saying? Of like, after the problem has occurred, but the real seller, the real helper, the real prospector sells and prospects to Southwest Airlines before the meltdown at Christmas, because they're asking them a certain amount of questions and they're like, statistically speaking, this is what's going to happen if you keep rolling forward. And then all of a sudden you have a buying crew on the line because this impact is going to come. And like they're solving or you're prospecting, creating demand around something they didn't know about before that Grinch comes out for Christmas and wrecks Christmas because of their systems. So I think that's the main thing people are missing, that it's always what a prospector should have been doing, but especially now. I'm like, now the former play it should never have worked, but especially isn't working now.
Yeah, I feel like the change is essentially this. You were searching for people in market. Now you're creating demand. And the only way you can create demand is by telling them something they don't already know. Yeah. So you're no longer just a tape recorder asking them their needs and responding. This is how you make the leap to something that's somewhat of a trusted advisor, is you see things that maybe they're not seeing, and that's how you add value.
Totally.
What if your next big revenue move didn't come from a blog post or a cold LinkedIn scroll, but from a real conversation with leaders who've been there?
As the world of sales is constantly evolving and constantly changing, I think it's even more critical to get together with people to understand how are they helping to solve some of the problems that our buyers have today.
Meet Emblaze, a community of sharp B2B minds, CROs, CSOs, rising stars, sharing what's actually working in sales, enablement, and customer growth.
We always find a lot of value in the partnerships that we're able to form with some of the other great organizations that are part of the team here. And personally, I love the opportunity to connect with my peer group outside of other organizations and learn from them and try to figure out if there's things that they're doing that we can pull into our organization and benefit from.
Join a monthly forum, dig into science-backed strategy, and get insight you won't find in your feed. Start your Emblaze journey today at emblazegrowth.com.
How do we get more practical and even tactical? So speak to the leaders. What can they do for their teams? And then we'll take a little time to talk about some very specific things that literally what must change about your emails, for example. But how do leaders need to now equip their teams differently?
Okay, so the first thing that I would do from a leadership perspective, the main thing that you can do, in my opinion, is lead routing and sequence shell writing. Essentially, like everyone wants to take advantage of a trigger, a trigger-based. There's personalization, and there's relevance. Personalization is one-to-one. Relevance is one-to-many, regardless of what the cohort is. People who downloaded content, people who attended a webinar, whatever it is. The smartest thing that you can do as a leader is taking off list cleaning, list building, auto routing, and creating a sequence for each one of these relevant actions where the person in real time, like when they download content or when they attend a webinar, who is a part of that person's account, is auto routed straight through to the sequence. And what I do is my sequences, they have 5 emails, and the first and 5th email are the ones that change based on trigger. And basically the first line is like, hi, I noticed that you attended, and it's like the event that it's dynamic tagged in there, the Emblaze podcast episode, X with Becc Holland. But more importantly, and there's a personalization gap there. That's what the rep fills in. So all of these reps want to take advantage of these triggers, but what they can't do is figure out who just IPO'd, who just moved headquarters, who just attended this webinar in real time. And by the time that they do figure it out, hypothetically, the point of the matter is gone. So the number one thing that leaders can do is to build a sequence for each one of those actions, build in a way to where every time one of those actions happens, basically whoever owns the account, that the people in the CRM are auto-routed straight through to where they just have to focus on the 10% of personalization.
So that is a structural, if you will, administrative burden relieved so that your people can add the value.
Unbelievable. Yeah. For rep. 45% of the time is spent on list building alone, list cleaning alone. So to your point.
So you said 5 emails. Emails, that's still a thing. And something has got to change in how you do emails too, because if we're all still doing emails and you're not disagreeing, emails matter. What should I do? Like, give me a few examples of things I can practically do different and better tomorrow that are working today versus maybe what I was trying in the past.
So I'm going to try and go rapid fire for like a minute and a half a piece for 4 different buckets. Okay. But email is working as the punchline. It's just not working how most people do it. But the first thing to think about is email deliverability. So what email, or the first bucket is email deliverabilities. What email deliverability means is only 59% of your emails are being delivered to the primary inbox. So straight off the bat, 41 of the emails, if you send 100, people aren't seeing. And if what they're measuring for, essentially, what the ISPs are measuring for is, does this look like mass blast behavior, or does this look like an actual person? Now, you're marketed on a number of different things, almost from the local level of what are you doing and is your team doing? What is the recipient doing? Like, are they blocking you or hitting unsubscribe? And then from a federal level, are you on a blacklist for egregious behaviors? But the things, how I would think about it is, you're measured as a team and over time. So some quick tips on what to look for. If you have less than a 50% open rate, you have the email deliverability problem, period. And industry average is 15 to 25%. So some tips on it: less links the better. So like if you have a link to your LinkedIn, if you have a link to your phone number, a link to the website, every single time you include a link, you are encouraging basically your email to not be delivered. No same subject lines. So even if it's me sending an email and my team member sending an email to a completely different person, completely different company, your domain is measured the same. So they're like, why are they sending a subject line that looks exactly the same? So no two subject lines should be the same. No more than 50 emails a day, no capitalized letters, no red font, no exclamation points. I wouldn't batch them all out at one time of like, I'm not going to send out 50 emails at one time of like 1 o'clock, let's say. And equidistant times will hurt you. 105, 110, 115, 120, 125, etc. I would avoid social words in the subject line like your LinkedIn about bio, because they'll flag it to social promo. Less GIFs, the better, oddly enough. Images are okay, but not after 4 images. And bit.ly or shortened links or 404s are really going to hurt you, and verified sites will help you. So unverified sites will hurt you in terms of links. So those are just kind of some of the rapid fire tips on deliverability. If you don't have DKIM, DMARC, and SPF set up, then it's gonna hurt you. So I would for sure think about a data decay and an email deliverability strategy before I even think about anything else.
Okay,
That's
bucket number 1, deliverability. Take a swig. Bucket number 2.
Bucket 2 is I would think about subject lines. So, I mean, again, the industry average open rate is 15 to 25%. Part of that is deliverability, and part of that is subject line. So subject line, some things I would think about. I would go to my personal spam and start to look at the subject lines, how they are and how they're structured. You got to keep in mind there's 20,000 different engineers at Google. I would imagine 19,000 of them are after us. What they're looking for is like sales behaviors. There's always a pattern. Like a personality is just defined as a pattern of interactions. Personality disorder is just an abnormal pattern, but there's always a pattern. So I would look at my subject lines and think, do they read like a marketing email? Do they read like a sales email? And think about the preview text too. If it says anything about SEO optimization, we miss you, people aren't going to open it. And when they don't open it, if they don't open it and delete it, it actually double hurts against your deliverability. So I would think about, is this something that a normal salesperson or marketer would say? If it's anything above scale of 1 to 10 and 8, I would say yes, and you got to start over again. So it's about saying things that basically a normal salesperson or normal marketer doesn't say within reason, that doesn't say, and it has to hook to the body, because if it is something they would normally say, then someone's going to delete it because they know what it is before they open it. That's bucket 2.
Okay. Bucket 3, do you need a drink of water?
No, I don't. I'm wrapped up. Bucket 3 would be readability. So my biggest tips on the readability of an email. I mean, the average person spends 9 seconds reading an email. A myth out there is that it should be in the F-shaped pattern. Actually, F-shaped pattern was for email, for web design, not for emails. And it was the worst reading pattern. It increased scanning, but not comprehension. In terms of the actual email itself, I would think about 4 to 5 lines max. I would never include 2 lines in a paragraph. The more acronyms, the better. The fewer company names, the better. If you're going to mention your company name, I would do it once, and I would do it at the very bottom because they're going to think you're a sales rep. Acronyms are your friend. Punctuation's your friend. Odd punctuation's your friend. And I would for sure avoid the deadly language that is the normal sales language. So I have 250 terms on my site that are the most commonly used email. Terms in email of like just following up, just circling back, just bubbling to the top of the inbox, happy Monday, hope you and your kids are safe during these uncertain times. My name's blank. We work with blank, and we're the number one blank who helps blank do blank. We work with leaders just like you. Quick chat, 15 minutes, quick coffee chat, sync, SEO optimization. Congrats on the funding. You want to buy our stuff because we work with people who have money to buy our stuff. My CEO sent me your way. I was really impressed by your profile. All of these terms, the more that you use them, cheers, quick call, quick connect, intro in the subject line, the more that you use those terms, the more and more likelihood that they see you as a salesperson and that they delete the email before they even get to the midsection. So especially the left hand of the first line and the right hand side of the first line, left hand side of the second line, in the middle of the second line, and then on down the row on the left hand side is really a hot spot of if you open the email with "Hope you're well," you're done.
I can't finish this conversation because I got to go retool every single one of my emails. Even though I'm trying to be authentic and even though it's personal, I still say those things.
Yeah.
Well, we'll put a link. We'll put a link in the show notes so that people can go to your website. As Becc, a former Google engineer who's decided these are the words. And anybody who's watching this episode on 1.5x is dying now because you're already there. All right. Bucket number 4.
Bucket number 4, I'd say the biggest thing, and I know that we have limited time here. When you ask them a question, it has to be objective, no adjectives, no adverbs, and it has to be a question that you couldn't have known the answer to without them, non-leading, and a question that it has to be a question about a metric that's helping you understand if they have that problem. And when they do answer the question, you're like, oh, they do or don't have that problem. Meaning it can't be do you have sucky emails? Well, it's well, what does that even mean? And I can't even answer that question. I'm going to answer to the best of my ability. And I know you're just leading me somewhere. So I'm not going to answer the question. It needs to be a genuine question that you're what's your email open rate, if you don't mind me asking? Or do you have a bad email open rate? Is bad question. They're going to answer you to the best of their ability. But if you say, what's your email open rate? The reason that I ask is industry average is 15 to 25, and anything less than a 50% open rate, you have an email deliverability problem. If you do me a favor, go back to your open rate. And if it's anything less than 40%, if you give me 15 minutes to, that should be the angle. But when you ask the question in the email, you have to be after something they don't know. So it should be about a metric, an objective question, and it will help you understand based on their answer, whether they had a problem. But the question that I'd be asking is one around a metric that they likely have a problem that they likely don't know about. That's usually when you're going to really run into the gold. So my 4th tip is when you're asking a question, it can't be leading, it can't have adjectives, or doctors and lawyers both ask questions. But because of their goal, we see one is more sleazy than the other because one's trying to get someone to admit something so someone else believes something. So are you asking questions like a doctor or a lawyer is the biggest thing that I would ask myself when I'm reading my own emails that I'm writing.
That's awesome. All of that in just a few minutes. And every one of those is a useful tidbit. It's not theory. Those are very practical. And again, we'll send you to Beck's website so you can slow the tape down and take your notes on that. Any last thoughts, Becc, this is your moment. If I'm, again, a leader of people who own their job, is either BDR, SDR, or a seller needs to fill their own pipeline, any last thoughts that you'd like to wrap up with that I as a leader should take away?
Yeah, I would say, and equip, prospecting is tough. It really is tough. I mean, it's one of the toughest jobs that I would argue at an organization, but it doesn't have to be. It really doesn't. The only key is, are your reps industry experts? Do they know information about the buyer? If they don't, then you have to start there, because it doesn't matter what hook or permission-based opener or words that I use. Once we get into that conversation, once the buyer realizes oh, this person can't help me, even if they wanted to, because they don't have that information. So I'd say the 2 things that I would do if I'm a leader, number 1 is get my reps to start aggressively learning about the buyer. Just give them metric sheets and start quizzing them at the end of the week. What is the average, this for the buyer? If it's profit margin, for the CFO, What's the average gross profit margin for someone who's in our market? If it's, CX director, it's like, what's the average churn? What's the average net upsell? So that they know those metrics and they have that will build their confidence that they can find an unknown because they have the information. But on the other hand, for you as a leader, the number one thing that you can do to help enable your reps, other than helping them enable themselves by learning about the buyer, is to become an expert. Like, you have to put yourself in the chair. You have to become an expert in helping them write what goes into a great email. They're not struggling with motivation. What they're struggling with is they're not hitting their numbers. And because of that, they have no motivation to keep going. So I would study from an email perspective. The reason I got into this is because I was a leader, that I'm like, I have to find the components. I have to write these emails for my reps, that enables them to, they have to fill in this 10% or 15% or whatever it is in terms of personalization and hook it. But I need to be the person that searches out what are the psychological principles in the aesthetic of an email and what time of day that you should be sending this, so that they are successful, that the average person who walks into my organization is successful because of the time and work I put in. So the most effective thing that you can do if you're a leader is start studying, study until your brain bleeds about what an effective email is. Try in the front lines, and then you get up and you do it again, because that's what it means to you lead from the back and you lead from the front. So you have to be so good at a tactician from a tactical perspective. If you're AE leader, what are the 5 questions that they should have been asking in that discovery that they weren't? And if those people will fall, because they should, because they get better whenever you're involved in the call review or in the discovery. So if you can become a brilliant tactician yourself, like, that is where people are going to start. It's tough. But that's the job of being a leader, is I need to do the things and put in the hours and put in the reps and find out the facts that are the things that are going to help them from an email perspective. I wasn't great from a emotional perspective, meaning I always struggled with, I'm like, ask them about their weekend because they need to do that and they need to talk about that so they can open up. But I was counting down the seconds, but no one ever quit on me in my entire career. And if I had to guess why, it wasn't because of my emotional skills. That they're like, well, she looks awkward when she's asking about my weekend. But I'd be like, say this back, and it would work. So, and I don't think that I'm unique. So if put in the time, put in the hours to be a brilliant tactician is my biggest giveaway.
Yeah, I think the leader who just stands behind the person pushing the rock up the hill and just goes, grind. It's just about grinding. It's about activity, grind. That's not helpful. Like, they're pushing a rock up a hill. Get under there and put some roller skates under that rock so that it rolls, So if you don't know what it takes to put a rock up a hill and how to make it easier to push that rock up the hill, people are going to fail. And you're going to be like, yeah, that's just this business. Prospecting's hard. People don't grind, and you just churn and burn them. And the reality is they don't see a path to success. You didn't give them any tools to be successful other than to grind. And there you go. And you just accept it. Like, oh, well, that's just how this job works. So thank you for that. You've now made it possible. You've left people with no excuse. They have to add more value than they probably have been. So Becc, always great to see you.
Great to see you. I know it's hard. Anyone listening, I know it's hard. I mean, because you're like, well, I didn't get that. And it's like, well, we got to break the cycle. And, we got to do the skates work. It's like, I don't know.
My mommy didn't do that for me, so I'm not going to do that for you. Oh, boy.
It was so good to see you. Thank you for having me.
Yep. Take care, Becc. Good to see you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
That's it for today. Another great episode. Thank you to our guest, Becc Holland. Thank you, Tim Riesterer. And thank you for watching or listening on your favorite podcast app. Remember to like, subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you're watching or listening, as it helps other leaders find us. And we would love to have you explore what the Emblaze community is all about and join us as a member. Just go to corporatevisions.com/community to learn more. We'll see you next time.